Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Syafiqah binti Salihin and my metric number is 1250914. I will be presenting a case of analysis of MEOR ATIQULRAHMAN against Fatimah binti SIHI. First of all, for introduction, the case of MEOR ATIQULRAHMAN against Fatimah binti SIHI is significant because it highlights the relationships between individual right, Islamic principles and constitutional law in Malaysia. This case concerns the issue of students wearing the serban or turban to school as part of their religious practice. It raised an important constitutional question about whether restricting the wearing of the serban violates the right to freedom of religion under Article 11 of the Federal Constitution. The case also demonstrates how Malaysian courts balance personal religious freedom with the responsibility of public institutions such as school to maintain discipline and order. For the next part, objective. The objective of this case study are threefold. First, to understand the legal principles relating to freedom of religion, constitutional rights and the application of Islamic values within the Malaysian legal system. Second, to examine the facts of the case, the relevant law and the judicial reasoning behind the court's decision. Finally, this study aims to explore how the courts balance individual rights, religious consideration, and the role of the judiciary when resolving disputes involving religious matters. Next part is issue. The main legal issue before the court was whether the school's restriction on wearing the serban, together with the disciplinary action taken against the students, violated their constitutional right to freedom of religion under Article 11 of the Federal Constitution. In other words, the court had to determine whether wearing the serban was a protected religious practice that could not be restricted by the school. Next part is facts of the case. The facts of the case began when MEOR ATIQULRAHMAN and several students wore the serban as part of what they believed to be their religious practice. However, the school authorities considered the serban to be inconsistent with the official school uniform regulations. As a result, disciplinary actions was taken against the students for failing to comply with the school's dress code. The students challenged the school's decision and brought the matter before the courts. They argued that the restriction interfered with their constitutional right to freely practice their religion under Article 11 of the Federal Constitution. The court was therefore required to determine whether the school's actions were legally justified or whether they amounted to a violation of the students' constitutional rights. Now, I will explain the legal analysis of this case. The Federal Court interpreted Article 11 of the Federal Constitution, which protects the right to freedom of religion. However, the court explains that this right is not absolute. The court also recognized that schools have the authority to enforce uniform and disciplinary rules, since wearing the serban was not considered an essential religious obligation for school students. The school's regulation was found to be lawful. Therefore, the court balanced the students' religious right with the school's responsibility to maintain discipline and order. Next part is judgment. The Federal Court held that the school's restriction on wearing the serban was not inconsistent with the Federal Constitution. The court explained that although Article 11 guarantees freedom of religion, not every religious practice is automatically protected from reasonable regulation. It found that the school had the legal authority to enforce uniform requirements and disciplinary rules in order to maintain order and discipline within the educational environment. Therefore, the disciplinary action taken against the students did not amount to a violation of their constitutional right. This judgment demonstrates that constitutional rights must sometimes be balanced against legitimate administrative interests, especially in public educational institutions. Now, I will move on to the discussion. This case highlights the balance between individual religious rights and the authority of schools in Malaysia. Although Article 11 guarantees freedom of religion, the court held that this right must be balanced with reasonable school regulations to maintain discipline and order. Overall, this case demonstrates the important role of the judiciary in interpreting constitutional rights while ensuring that educational institutions can carry out their responsibilities effectively. In conclusion, the case of MEOR ATIQULRAHMAN against Fatimah binti SIHI illustrates that the challenge of balancing individual religious freedom with the authority of educational institutions in Malaysia. The Federal Court recognized the importance of freedom of religion while also affirming that schools have the responsibility to maintain discipline and enforce reasonable regulation. Overall, this case remains an important constitutional decision because it shows how the judiciary interprets constitutional rights and resolves conflicts between personal religious practice and institutional responsibilities while upholding the rule of law. That's all from me. Thank you.